The school told me her new name would be Skylar and that she was a boy.
Jessica sued her daughter's school district for secretly transitioning her 11-year-old daughter.
I did want to tell my mom, but I was told that I couldn't.
Did you have any guilt for hiding something from your mom?
I felt horrible.
There's a policy at schools called the parental secrecy policy. Keeping it secret from parents doesn't help a child because it could kill the child.
Tonight, we are talking about a topic that is highly charged emotionally. It has evoked strong feelings and opinions culturally and political. Why is it such a hot topic? Because we are talking about our children and what they should or shouldn't be taught about in school. We're talking about whether or not they're being educated or indoctrinated when it comes to certain issues about their sexualization. We're talking about if it should be done, when it should be done, who should do it, how much parents are entitled to know. Everyone, and I mean everyone, seems to have strong feelings about it. But here's the thing, I don't really care how you feel. I barely care how I feel. What matters to me is the science, the data. What results tell us is in the best interest of the children. I could care less about self-referential agendas. What I'm interested in doing here at Dr. Phil Primetime is having intelligent conversations where all sides can weigh in and have an intelligent, fact-based conversation, an intelligent debate, so people, in this case, parents and educators, can make informed decisions about healthy development of our children. Some people don't see it that way. Some people are not in favor of free speech, they're only in favor of their speech. Those are the people who jump on anyone that disagrees with them and labels them haters because someone dares to question. They dare to give the other side the chance to be heard. Therefore, I have and will be labeled a hater here at Dr. Phil Primetime because I am in favor of free speech and I am going to allow sides to be heard. This is not communist China or Russia where someone tells you what you can and cannot say. This is America, and I'm choosing to stand up to the tyranny of the fringe and not be bullied into silence, and I hope you won't either. We are talking about our children, and they deserve to have us fighting for their future. So let's get started.
Across Texas, protesters at school board meetings are accusing educators of forcing pornography or obscene content on children. The anger is largely aimed at school libraries. This is happening all over the country.
And I stand here today in front of all of you because I am outraged. How do you not know what was going on your own campuses?
This filth is patently offensive. It is not legal to have sex acts depicted for minors.
This is the smut that he is finding. We do not need to be having literature that's showing boys how to. I'm very, very frustrated about it, okay? And you may think that schools know the best for our children. You know who know the best for our children? The parents.
Educators are being put on notice.
This is pornography, plain and simple, and it does not belong in our schools.
My first guest, Jessica, sued her daughter's school district for secretly transitioning her 11-year-old daughter, which resulted in a landmark legal victory.
This whole thing started when Alicia started the 6th grade at a new middle school. I had started noticing a rapid change with her. She came to me and said, "Hey, Mom, they're opening a new club. The Equality Club is a gender club that you can learn about bisexual, transgender, binding your breast. Don't tell your parents. They don't understand." The staff members of that club helped transition my child into a boy. I noticed her clothes started changing, flannel shirts, hats backwards, Converse with baggy jeans. She had really long, beautiful, brown, thick hair, and it slowly got shorter and shorter until it ended up shaved. So the school called me and told me they want me to come into a meeting, and I felt like I was completely ambushed. The school told me her new name would be Skylar and that she was a boy. Call him a he. He could use the men's restroom. I didn't know how to process anything. It was all so fast, so I cried. The school encouraged her to be secretive and private from me. She's been told the whole time, you can't talk to your mom because she won't back you up, she won't support you. An 11-year-old should not have secrets from their parents. Alicia was not confused about her gender. She was dealing with depression because her dad and I separated. It didn't feel like that's what she wanted. I believe in my heart that my daughter was targeted and that she was influenced to become a different gender against her will. I was very pissed that this whole situation was even happening. I decided I'm going to the school board meeting and I'm gonna speak. And I'm gonna let everybody know how I feel.
My name is Jessica. How dare you act as if these teachers, they've done nothing wrong. You allowed predatory information to a young child that doesn't even know how to comprehend it all. Did you think that no parent would ever come forward? You will not quiet me today.
Schools and school staff should be held accountable. And I'll fight until the day I die for my kids.
You felt pretty strongly about that.
Very, very strong.
Do you feel like they thought they were intimidating parents and nobody would challenge them?
Absolutely. I felt that they even intimidated me, but I found strength to be able to step forward. And right now you have to be really careful, because if we try to go talk about our kids or bring it up, it's always hushed down or, pushed aside. So yes, I found my voice. And
you feel like your daughter was actually brainwashed by two staff members, and your daughter was experiencing a difficult time, right?
Yes, me and her dad had separated, so her life kindly abruptly changed. Her depression, her sadness kind of came from, hey, things just changed really rapidly in my household.
And children do have a reaction to that.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So why would they assume that this was necessarily gender dysphoria?
Well, I personally believe that it starts because there's other agendas out there. I don't think my daughter was heard when she tried to express the sadness. I think it was kind of overlooked. She was kind of shy, and I think it was more of a target.
I mentioned when I was starting tonight, I said self-referential agendas. Sometimes there's an old saying that if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And if somebody has a certain point of view themselves, they can sometimes put everybody else in that same category, that same mindset, that same position. Do you think that happened with your daughter when she went to this group?
Personally, I think what's going on in California, in schools in general, nationwide, it's more of a trend. It happened all abruptly. It's not even a child, it's a number. So I don't think that they're really looking in the best interest or who the person actually is. I think it's just to kind of gather more towards that. So.
Okay, get more into that group.
Yeah.
Was she encouraged in this direction, or was this all of her own volition?
Absolutely not. There's a policy at schools. It's called the parental secrecy policy. And by having that policy, our children are very unprotected because it allows them to hide things, including clubs and different agendas that other staff members may have. So it's a very scary time for our kids.
Well, was she having suicidal thoughts?
Yes, she was. She told the counselor, hey, this is what I'm feeling. I was never told of the thoughts, and as a mandate reporter, I should have known that. It was really heartbreaking as a mom because I got to watch her fall apart, and I got to watch her be taken away by an ambulance, all because of hiding things from parents. That's a life. That's not a name. It's not an initial. That's not just a student. That's somebody's family member.
Did you feel like you failed your daughter by not seeing this?
I don't feel like I failed her at all. I was out of the loop. I was blown away when I was told what was going on. It wasn't even from my daughter either. This was something that was so pushed by multiple staff that it was just this really secretive thing that happened so abruptly with her that she didn't even know her own change.
If this had been her thought, her feeling, her direction, and she had come to you about it, would you have cast her out to the curb?
So I'm a Christian mom, And no matter what, even if it's not a biblically thing, you know, to be this gender or believe in this way, I would have loved her no matter what. I would have loved the chance to know that she may be experiencing this so that I can guide her.
So she didn't need protecting from you.
No, I would have protected her with my life if I would have known.
Well, Jessica's daughter is actually here and wants to speak out. I'm always very sensitive and delicate about children, but she wants to talk. She wants to tell her story.
A child's sexual orientation, what gender they decide to be, it's nothing that belongs in a school. Stick to what you're supposed to, the arithmetic, and let me handle the rest, because I'm a damn good mom.
Schools often say, well, we're respecting the students' privacy. We're trying to take care of their rights. Jessica's daughter, Alicia, really wants to talk about this, and let's take a listen to what she's had to say so far.
Going into 6th grade, I was really excited to be going to a new school. My friends invited me to go to a club. They were teaching about gender ideology and how to bind your breasts and how to hide things from your parents. Basically everything that had to do with either sexual orientation or gender identity. It kind of made me uncomfortable. I felt pressure to change who I was, whether that be how I dressed, how my hair looked, what my name was. I was being pressured to become a boy. At the time, I was extremely confused. I was told that my mother would not be supportive and that things should be kept from her, and I figured they must know something that I don't. They're probably smarter than me, and I was never 100% sure that it was right. Everything felt wrong. I got more antisocial. I started isolating myself from everybody. I felt stuck. I definitely feel that the school took advantage of my vulnerability. It was emotionally damaging to me.
Well, Alicia, thank you for being here and being willing to talk about this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an amazing opportunity.
Well, I'm glad you see it that way. And you say that staff members were telling you that if you went home and talked about what they were talking to you about, that your mother would not be supportive.
Yes, they assumed that she wouldn't be supportive and that she would never accept me and she would never love me if I came out to her or anything like that.
Okay, did they know your mom?
No, they didn't know my mom at all. They had never even really talked to her, except for at like an orientation meeting.
And they were encouraging you to hide articles that they had given you, information they had given you, just keep all of this stuff where she won't find it?
Yes, they told me to keep it in a folder of work that she had already looked at, so she had no reason to check inside of the folder, and the information was just something that an 11-year-old should not be reading.
You sought help from a guidance counselor.
Yes, I did. It was supposed to be a good opportunity for me to talk about how I was feeling about my parents or things that were going on between my parents, but it slowly turned into them also trying to get me to go to the club that was run by the other staff members and them telling me that I was not who I was, that I wasn't who I was supposed to be.
And so what was your thinking?
At the time, I was extremely confused because I didn't know what anything really meant. I was just trying to go to school and learn and just make friends, but it really just turned into not that.
So you had trusted adults.
Yes.
One, a counselor. Did you start thinking, well, maybe they're right?
Growing up, I was a kid that trusted adults, so I was starting to think maybe they know what's better for me because they're older than I am. They have more wisdom, but it very clearly wasn't true.
Did you have any guilt or funny feelings for hiding something from your mom?
I felt horrible for hiding things from my mom. I didn't really want to hide them. I kept telling everybody I want to tell my mom, and all my peers around me were telling me, she won't be supportive, she won't love you, don't tell her, hide this, hide that. But it was never something I really wanted to do.
Right. You're shaking your head when you hear that.
I'm angry the fact that I wasn't involved in it. I didn't even get a chance. Like I said, I didn't get a chance to even try to help with her. They judged me. So yeah, I'm angry I wasn't involved because her life was in danger at 2 points.
And how did you finally tell your mother?
My mom was pulled into a meeting that I had no knowledge of. It was after school one day. I remember not saying anything in that meeting and being talked over the entire time. Yeah. And I was trying to say stuff, but nobody would let me talk. And I just remember looking at my mom and crying because I knew something wasn't right, but I was glad that I wasn't hiding anything anymore. Glad that she finally knew.
And how are you doing now?
I'm amazing now. I'm better than ever. I'm extremely happy. I have a really, really good group of friends at the school I go to now. I'm at a really good school as well. And I'm just overall 1,000 times better than how I was in middle school.
And how do you get along with your mom?
She's my best friend. We talk about everything.
Good. I want you guys to continue to contribute as we go along here. My next guest, Adam Larrivee, is a board-certified transgender care therapist who says teachers supporting students change their gender identity are helping reduce the likelihood of suicidal ideation.
The number one thing that we can do if we want to reduce statistics around suicidality for trans youth is to honor their pronouns, right? So right now, if 1 out of 2 trans youth is going to attempt to commit suicide or think about attempting to commit suicide, when we honor their pronouns, those statistics drop by half. It's a matter of saving lives.
All right, Adam, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here.
You feel like parents shouldn't necessarily or absolutely shouldn't be told about what's going on with their kids if they are wanting to change their pronouns, explore their identity?
I think taking an absolute on a position like that is really difficult because you're going to have situations on either end of the spectrum where youth might be, by forcing them to come out, right, or by telling their parents, they might be put into a dangerous situation.
Right.
And they could be harmed as a result of that. But obviously, if there are mental health professionals who are able to help that transition or to assess that before decisions like that are made, I think that is probably the healthiest route, just to ensure that we're not sending children into dangerous situations at home.
And what does the research tell us on what percentage of the time kids go into a dangerous situation if they do disclose this to their parents?
I don't know that I would know what the statistics around that would be.
Would you guess it to be pretty low?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think the research tells us, and I think common sense tells us, that most parents are pretty supportive of their children. But you do have mouth breathers that if you send their kid home and they tell them something that's non-traditional, they're going to have a bad reaction to it. And those kids are probably in a bad situation from the jump, no matter what. But that would be a really, hopefully, a low percentage of the circumstances. But in this situation, I think you are part of the majority that would have and did, when you found out about it, support your daughter 100%.
Absolutely. Keeping it secret from parents doesn't help a child because it could kill a child. It's dangerous. Parents want to be involved. It's our civil right. We birthed them.
Absolutely.
And your position is that kids have rights too. And if a child is talking to a teacher or a counselor and says, my choice, I don't want this to be out there yet. I don't want to come out to my parents at this point, that you have a duty to the child to respect their privacy and their rights.
Yes, I would agree with that. What we want to do is really assess what the barriers are to be able to share that information. You know, so if they say this is my choice and I want to keep this information with me, my big question is why? What is the reason for that, right? If they think, you know, well, I don't think mom's going to respond well to it, or I don't think dad's going to respond well to it. Can you give me some examples to support that? So I think it's a situation that really does require kind of like another set of eyes and another set of ears to make sure that the situation is going to be safe for the kid before that information is relayed. And again, we're potentially putting them into an unsafe situation.
Yeah, but don't a lot of kids think that parents might have a bad reaction to a lot of things that it turns out they don't?
Yeah, I think that is a normal reaction for a child.
I did want to tell my mom, but I was told that I couldn't.
Why?
because I was told that she couldn't be trusted or that she wouldn't support me, even though I knew she would.
How do you categorize a child that is wanting to start transitioning? Is this a psychological thing? Is it a biological thing? Is it a medical consideration? Is it mental, emotional?
So gender dysphoria being the anxiety surrounding your gender and not aligning mentally with the gender that you were born with. It is a specialized type of treatment where we really want to reduce the symptoms of dysphoria. Being transgender is not a mental health condition, but gender dysphoria and that feeling that happens when you feel like you don't have that alignment mentally and physically is what we're actually treating. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, so the gender dysphoria, the anxiety associated with being in between, not living the way you feel like you should or whatever, that is a mental health condition.
Gender dysphoria, yes.
And that would be treated by a mental health professional.
Correct.
Someone that has specialty training in that regard.
Correct. I mean, ideally, right?
Ideally,
some
right.
therapists.
So my question is, how many teachers, staff, coaches have that kind of training? It'd be a very small number, right?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, very small, if any. I don't know that teachers are the people who should be doing those types of assessments or determinations. Teachers are there to educate. I think, teachers' responsibility is to create a safe classroom for everyone who's in that room. But to be doing mental health assessments or anything along those lines would be outside of their scope.
But do you think that's happening?
I don't think it's happening on a consistent or regular basis, no.
I personally disagree. It's happening in kindergarten. I mean, I know that it's in the schools. Once I came forward and I decided, you know what? I'm going to make my voice heard. So many children came forward with similar situations. It's happening.
Do you think teachers are changing pronouns and not advising parents?
So the teacher is making the determination about the child's pronouns?
Right.
I have never heard of a case like that, no.
Where do you live?
Florida.
Wow.
Wow, I never heard of a single case. Have you heard that there are like 10,000 districts that have pending legislation to stop that? Reckon why that's happening?
I think there's a lot of factors that influence situations like that in legislative policies, but I think legislation doesn't necessarily always reflect what's actually happening or going on. Sometimes it's about the politician's platform or a variety of factors that would play into that.
Yeah, so you think that's just a totally made up problem?
I think it's, similar to issues like when gay marriage was on the table, right? And we were discussing that, and there was a big issue about that nationwide. I think that politicians and news outlets have a tendency to use rhetoric and to twist facts and information to gather votes so that they can stay in office or obtain office. So in terms of teachers telling kids that, what their pronouns are, that just doesn't make sense to me, how that would kind of align or why that would happen or how that would even be allowed to happen.
Well, that would be great news if that's just totally made up and that's just not happening.
Yeah.
Because if they don't have the training like you do, then they don't have any more idea than a goose how to go about that, and they wouldn't be any more qualified to go through that process with a student than they would to take out their spleen.
Right.
Right?
I think that if you guys are a perfect example, that there are circumstances of this happening.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it is a common thing. I think we would hear about it more if that were the case.
Well, your point, though, is that we are hearing about it, but it's just media hype. And I certainly don't think that teachers or staff are lined up at the door to the school when it convenes in the fall, and as kids come in, they start saying, okay, what do you want your pronouns to be? And I don't think that's what's happening at all. But I also don't think that it's not happening. According to the William Institute, about 300,000 youth, 13 to 17 years old, identify as transgender. That doesn't mean that that was suggested to them or that it was brokered with a teacher. but it is a very small percentage of the school population. I think it's 55 million kids in public school, so it's a very small percentage. My next guest gained attention after a video went viral of her reading from an explicit book she discovered in her son's public school library.
After seeing a September 9th school board meeting in Texas on pornography in the schools, I decided to check the titles at my child's school. These books include pedophilia, sex between men and boys. One book describes a 4th grade boy performing oral sex on an adult male. This is not an oversight. Do not interrupt my time.
Everybody,
I will stand here until my time is restored. These books are in stock and available in the high school. Pornography is offensive to all people. It is offensive to common decency.
Our next speaker.
Well, Stacy says that there's an intentional push for this material in schools. What do you mean there's an intentional push, and what material are you talking about?
Well, I'm speaking specifically about pornographic materials, and let's define what pornographic means, and that would be a depiction of acts of sex. And what I read aloud are verbal descriptions of acts of sex and also illustrated descriptions of sexual acts. Now, there is a coordinated push because I noticed they've all come in the same time period, which started at around 2018 to 2020. And the purpose, I think, is definitely to desensitize our kids to these materials. And, you know, we have laws against this in this nation. That's the thing. You cannot show these images or read these passages here on this program. So how is it if I can't show it to you guys, to your audience, or we can't broadcast it, and it's illegal at the federal level, how does it magically suddenly become okay inside a school library? That makes no sense.
You're saying these books are just in the library?
Yes.
And any child can walk up and take them off the shelf?
Correct.
And look at them. Can any child check them out?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the books in particular, which was one of the worst, which was illustrated, it was in the comic book section alongside, you know, the Black Panther and the Avengers and Superman and the DC comics. So you're going to accidentally stumble across something that's completely X-rated in the comic book section.
Mm-hmm. What are you saying should happen?
Well, they shouldn't be there, right? Because if we're following the law, if I can't sit down on a park bench next to a child and be like, hey, what do you think about this, little boy? Why could you have that same material in a public school library paid for by your tax dollars? That makes no sense. There's a big disconnect there.
Yeah, well, some of these books that you're talking about do have stories and depictions of sex acts in really, I mean, they're drawings, but they're very graphic. Mm-hmm. One in particular that you provided is a grown male with a young boy. And that's a crime.
Right.
That's criminal in all 50 states, but yet it's in a library and it's not being depicted as defining a crime.
Right.
I mean, is there an age-appropriate point at which that is appropriate?
For pedophilia and to share that, I don't think that there is an age-appropriate time to share that. Where's the librarian with this? Who is monitoring these?
They're offering help to get the book. I can walk in and they'll guide me right there. So they're there.
And that's actually what happened. They are the ones that are actually selecting these titles. So we have a lot of what looks to me like activism going on by the librarians by bringing this kind of material into our schools.
Well, are you wanting to ban these books or restrict these books? Because people describe you as wanting to ban the books.
Right, they say you're a book banner. No, they're still going to be available to any adult who wants to buy them. We're trying to remove them in the presence of minors. They should not be in the presence of minors at a school.
And that doesn't seem so radical to me. I mean, we have R-rated movies, we have PG-13 rated movies, PG movies, and it seems that that's an attempt to categorize materials so it's appropriate for different ages. And you're not wanting to ban books, even though that's what you're accused of. You're wanting to restrict access to different ages.
Hi, y'all. I live in Pensacola, Florida, and I just wanted you to know what's going on around here. There's an English teacher who has compiled a list of 150 books she feels should be banned from our public school libraries. Fortunately, before any of the books can be banned, they have to be reviewed by a committee. So I joined one. Bottom line, if you want to be on one of these committees, please just message me and I'll get you connected.
Lindsay says that children have a right to see different viewpoints, different experiences, and even see themselves represented in the books. And you think that's important?
Absolutely. Our First Amendment protects our students' right to receive as well as to express ideas. And just listening backstage, I do want to touch on the definition of pornography because it is imagery, pictures, or verbiage that depicts sexual activity, but it's only meant to arouse. When a book has no other educational value but the sex, yes, that is considered pornography, and I'm on the same page with you. That doesn't need to be in our schools.
You're talking about First Amendment rights, but do you agree that there are books that children would be too young to see certain sex acts depicted?
Our educators and librarians curate our libraries to put books in age-appropriate categories. So the idea that that would happen is definitely diminished. Some books are mirrors, some books are windows, and it's important for our kids not only to see their lives and their struggles reflected back at them, but for them to also look in somebody else's life and be empathetic towards their struggles as well. And if we totally restrict that from our kids, I don't think we're doing them any services.
Well, now answer my question. Saying that it's a mirror, sometimes it's a window, that might be a nice description, but if you haven't reached a developmental point where you can respond to something with some objectivity and separate yourself from it and instead be traumatized by it, scared by it, not know how to talk about it to an adult, that's not appropriate material for a child.
Absolutely there are. And some of these books that we're talking about, though, they are meant for 17, 18-year-olds. They are meant for adults that we're sending off to war. So we're not talking my third grader reading genderqueer. So yes, our librarians, our educators, that's their job. That's what they went to school for, to determine, as well as the American Library Association, to determine.
Even the author of genderqueer says this is not for young children.
It's not, and it's not in libraries for young children. It should be in a place where only 17, 18-year-olds can access it. Same with books like Push, All Boys Aren't Blue. Some of these books are even seen on the AP Literature exam.
You keep saying our schools, but there's a lot more schools than your school, right? There's a lot more libraries that may not be following policy. I'm glad that your libraries are up to date, but it doesn't...
Well, no, they aren't. 40% of all book bans have come from the state of Florida. We're not up to date at all. But it's something that we are trying to access policy to make it better.
Speaking of being banned, you can't get in the library.
Right. I got a notice from the high school principal that I was not allowed to enter the library again. And that was because I wanted to go back and, look at some of the other books on the display, because sometimes you can't judge a book by its cover. You won't know what's inside until you pick it up and look at it. And one of the books I found was actually worse than the original genderqueer book. It has, a mom and a dad having sex, but in a different way where, they've switched the gender roles. And I think that's extremely perverse. And I don't see how that's helping a child, right? She's saying, well, you want them to see themselves or you want them to be supported. Well, who will stand in the gap for America's children? Because there is not support happening here. There is corruption happening here. We are corrupting our nation's children by exposing them to things that they are not meant to see. We have to protect our child's innocence, because if we don't, is there childhood at all? We have to keep up this fight. And as parents, we're going to have to become very involved and start paying attention to what's going on in our schools.
You were referencing protecting your child's innocence. So what did you mean by innocence?
Well, all children have a right to their innocence, right? And we all recognize this. I'm sure you're not in favor of child prostitution or human trafficking. And one of the ways that that's accomplished is through the use of pornography to desensitize the kids so that they're more vulnerable. It's called grooming. We are grooming kids in a way that's going to make them more vulnerable to predators and vulnerable to gender dysphoria and other mental health issues.
I mean, we keep saying pornography, but that's not really what's happening here. These are not just pornographic books that are being banned. You're talking about, in my community specifically, a lot of the books that have been challenged based on LGBTQ indoctrination, race baiting, things that, I mean, a story about Maya Rudolph, race baiting, Rosa Parks, race baiting. So to what end? How far are we going to take this?
You know, one of the things that has been very controversial, and it begins with recognizing a young person wants to change their pronouns, is then the next step is getting into gender-affirming care. And by the way, the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Endocrine Association, I can just go down the list, all support gender-affirming care for those that feel that's what they want to do. And I'm not a physician, so you can weigh what I say against all of these medical associations. But a systematic review of data in Finland, Sweden, and England concluded that the risk-benefit ratio of youth gender transition ranges from unknown to unfavorable. Mm-hmm. And that really concerns me because I think the first rule for physicians is to do no harm, and to support something that you don't have long-term data that it does no harm seems really unusual to me. The evidence just does not support the notion that affirmative care of today's adolescents is net beneficial. And that's something that I think we have to really weigh. And so I dug into the actual studies. There's a 2011 study from the Netherlands. Depression decreased, but feelings of anxiety, anger, gender dysphoria, and body satisfaction didn't change after pubertal suppression for 70 transgender adolescents. In 2015, a UK study of 101 adolescents who received pubertal suppression and 100 who didn't. Both groups received psychotherapy and both saw improvement in mental health. No statistically significant difference in psychological functioning at the end of the study between the two groups. And if there was no difference and one had irreversible changes, that seems to me to be a pretty high-risk choice. And I wonder if we're rushing too fast towards those treatments. The good news is that you're willing to come here and talk about this.
Yeah.
And I think we've had an intelligent discussion, have we not?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I'm just protecting the debate lane.
Yep.
And we're going to have intelligent discussions so people can make up their own minds. I want to thank all of my guests for being here tonight. I also want to thank you at home for watching. When I talk about this issue, I mentioned all these medical organizations support gender-affirming care. They've studied it, they support it, they agree with it. I don't think history will be kind. I think there needs to be more research done before they do what they do. I just feel that way, and we'll see. Time will tell.